The Lebanese people resisted Israeli occupation in Beirut with bravery, until the Israeli army quickly withdrew after their hopes were dashed following the assassination of their ally Bashir Gemayel. His killing on September 14, 1982, just before officially assuming the presidency, ignited a desire for revenge among the Lebanese right-wing and Christian militias. And the smell of blood began to fill the air. On the 16th of September in the year 1982, the Israeli army, in conjunction with the South Lebanese army, laid siege to the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps under the pretext of the presence of 1,500 Palestinian militants within the camps. This facilitated the mission of 3 armed units from the Lebanese Phalange militia led by Eli Hobika to enter the camps. They ruthlessly perpetrated a massacre upon the inhabitants for a full 2 days, showing no mercy to children, women, and the elderly. Meanwhile, the Israeli army tightened its control over the entrances and exits of the camps, illuminating the night sky with spotlights to guide the Christian militia members and prohibiting journalists from entering until after the massacre had concluded, ensuring the world would awaken to one of the most horrific atrocities in modern times. The estimates of the number of Palestinians who fell victim to this massacre vary, ranging between 740 to 3,500. It is worth noting that the French journalist Alain Minyarg mentioned in his book Secrets of the Lebanese War, that the Sabra and Shatila massacre had been premeditated prior to the assassination of Bashir Gemayel. He claimed that there was a plan for bulldozers to raze the camp, transforming it into a Lebanese national zoo, in his words. The Arab response to the massacre followed the usual pattern of condemnation and denouncement. In Israel, a commission of inquiry was established, headed by the President of the Supreme Court, Isaac Khawand, and thus became known as the Khawand Commission. The committee announced its findings in February of the following year, 1983, and criticized Prime Minister Menachem Begin, Defense Minister Ariel Sharon, Foreign Minister Yitzhak Samir, and Chief of Staff Raphael Eitan. Following the Sabra and Shatila massacre, Israeli forces withdrew from Beirut, and multinational forces quickly returned to Lebanon. The Lebanese army was deployed throughout the city, which President Amin Gemayel declared as an open city. Despite the people's warm reception of the army, its personnel, along with intelligence operatives, initiated a wave of arrests in West Beirut, which aroused the citizens' discontent. Meanwhile, the United States sought to broker a peace treaty between Lebanon and Israel. On the 17th of May in the year 1983, President Amin Gemayel signed an agreement with Israel, stipulating Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon, contingent upon the simultaneous withdrawal of Syrian forces. However, Lebanese Muslims rejected the agreement, viewing it as Israel's attempt to establish permanent control over southern Lebanon. They considered Amin Gemayel a traitor for signing a surrender agreement rather than a peace treaty. Additionally, Syrian forces refused to withdraw from Lebanese territory. Maurice Draper, the U.S. envoy to the Middle East at that time, mentioned that if the agreement had been reached before its scheduled deadline, Syria might have accepted it. At that point, the Syrian army was exhausted and weak. However, by the time of the agreement, Leonid Brezhnev had passed away, and a new Soviet leader, Yuri Andropov, had emerged. He provided strong support to the Syrians, supplying them with various types of anti-aircraft weaponry. The Syrian army began to regain its confidence and strength. President Hafez al-Assad also sought assistance from the Iranians to confront Israel, leading to the emergence of Hezbollah, which originated from the ranks of the Amal movement as a Shiite force resisting Israeli occupation in the south. Hezbollah embraced the ideology of the Islamic Revolution in Iran and received support from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. In August of 1983, Israeli forces withdrew from the Chuf Mountains region, leaving the Druze and the Progressive Socialist Party militia, supported by certain Palestinian factions, in direct confrontation with the Christian Lebanese forces militia. Armed clashes quickly erupted between the two sides, and the Lebanese army aligned itself with the Christian forces. The intensity of the battles escalated, resulting in hundreds of casualties on both sides and the commission of massacres that also claimed the lives of innocent civilians. Meanwhile, the Palestinian resistance intensified its attacks against the Zionists who still occupied southern Lebanon. On November 11, resistance fighters managed to detonate the Israeli command headquarters in the city of Tyre in southern Lebanon, causing the deaths of numerous Israeli soldiers. Several attacks were also carried out against American targets, including a suicide bombing targeting the U.S. Embassy in Beirut and a suicide attack on the American and French military barracks, which led to the deaths of 241 American soldiers and 58 French soldiers. Before the end of the year, Druze leader and head of the Progressive Socialist Party, Walid Jumblat, survived an assassination attempt and accused President Amin Gemayel of being responsible for the attempt. The battles in the mountains concluded with the defeat of the Lebanese forces and the withdrawal of Christian fighters to the town of Deir al-Qamar and then to East Beirut. Analysts considered the Mountain War one of the fiercest chapters of the Lebanese Civil War and one of the factors contributing to the failure of the May 17th Agreement. As a result of President Amin Gemayel's adherence to the May 17th Agreement, the internal situation in Lebanon deteriorated. Gemayel decided to crush anyone opposing the agreement. Units of the army surrounded the Bir al-Abd mosque in the southern suburbs after worshippers attempted to stage a protest against the agreement. This led to clashes between the army and the protesters. In the Wadi Abu Jamil area, another clash erupted between the army and demonstrators, resulting in several fatalities. Thus, the opposition to Gemayel's rule expanded, and elements of the Amal movement managed to take control of several army positions. A state of turmoil gripped the streets, and tensions escalated between the populace and the army. Within days, the southern suburbs came under the control of the Amal movement, prompting artillery shells to be fired at the suburbs. Gemayel imposed a nighttime curfew, intensified military raids, and pursued individuals suspected of having affiliations with political parties. The western region was subjected to stringent military measures, while all calls to ease the rapidly escalating situation went unanswered. In response, young members of political parties took to the streets, and the opposition successfully gained control of the Lebanese army, the Ministry of Information building, marking a significant turning point. Units of the 6th Brigade of the Lebanese army responded to the call, withdrew their troops to their barracks, and refused orders issued by the military command. As a result, the fighters of the movement consolidated their control on the ground. The uprising garnered popular support against Israeli occupation and the Lebanese authorities, represented by President Amin Gemayel. Multinational forces withdrew, allowing President Hafez al-Assad to tighten his grip on Lebanon, prevailing over Israel, the United States, and the Palestine Liberation Organization. His allies, through the Amal movement, gained control of West Beirut alongside the Progressive Socialist Party and the Hezbollah movement. Meanwhile, East Beirut remained under the sovereignty of the Christian Lebanese forces alongside some units of the Lebanese army. Efforts were made by some parties to bring about peace between the conflicting factions. Under pressure, President Amin Gemayel officially agreed to cancel the May 17th agreement. In May 1983, a significant internal dispute within the Fatah movement erupted. It evolved from calls for reform within Fatah and the Palestinian Revolution into an armed conflict, and a group of officers within the organization defected from Yasser Arafat and declared their opposition to his policies. Syria supported the defectors, and the conflict led to Yasser Arafat's departure from Tripoli, Lebanon, along with around 4,000 fighters. However, he returned to Tripoli once more in an attempt to regain control within the organization. Syria, however, did not welcome his visit, and Arafat left Lebanon for the last time, never to return. After the withdrawal of the multinational forces from Beirut, in April 1985, with support from Syria, the Shiite Amal movement and the Druze Progressive Socialist Party attacked the Marabouan organization, loyal to Arafat. The organization was crushed and completely eliminated within 4 hours. In the following month, May 1985, also with Syrian support and indirect assistance from Israel, the Amal movement attacked Palestinian Fatah fighters with the aim of taking control of the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps, as well as the Burj al-Barajna camps in Beirut. The 6th Infantry Brigade of the Lebanese Army, the 78th Infantry Battalion loyal to General Michel Aoun, participated in the assault. Faced with a force 5 times larger than their own, the camps were destroyed and reduced to ruins. The Progressive Socialist Party did not engage in combat against the Palestinian Liberation Organization, but, on the contrary, its militias clashed with the Amal movement in West Beirut when some of its members attempted to remove the Lebanese flag from certain government buildings and replace it with the party's flag. Innocent civilians once again fell victim to these battles. Under international pressure, the Fatah movement signed a ceasefire agreement with the National Front for the Liberation of Palestine on June 17. However, the conflict in the mountains did not cease and continued for 3 years, weakening Muslim forces and dividing them. The conflict resulted in 3,781 casualties according to the official Lebanese government account, although it is likely that the actual number is much higher. In the waning months of 1984, the Syrian regime endeavored to mediate among the conflicting parties, culminating in an accord among the 3 Lebanese factions, the Shiite Amal movement, the Progressive Socialist Party led by Walid Jumblat, and the Christian Lebanese forces. The objective was to bring an end to the Lebanese civil war, with the agreement stipulating the abolition of sectarianism from the governance system and bestowing upon the cabinet full executive authority. The accord was inked on the 28th of December 1985, with Nabi Berri representing the Amal movement, Walid Jumblat representing the Progressive Party and the Druze community, and Eli Hobika standing for the Christian militias. Nevertheless, some politicians and Christian religious figures opposed the accord due to its provision allowing for the presence of Syrian military forces to maintain peace in Lebanon, thereby granting Syria considerable influence over Lebanese affairs. A schism emerged within the Christian Lebanese forces leadership regarding the agreement, with Eli Hobika in favor, whereas Samir Gigi, the chief of staff of the Lebanese forces, opposed it. This dispute escalated into an armed conflict in January 1986, resulting in the defeat of Samir Gigi's forces against Eli Hobika's troops, who attempted to return to East Beirut but failed. Alliances within the Christian Lebanese forces subsequently shifted, leading to the failure of the trilateral agreement. The situation among Muslims in West Beirut was no better than that of Christians in East Beirut. The Amal movement, established in 1974 as an armed wing of the Deprived Ones movement founded by Imam Musa al-Sadr, initially aligned with the Palestine Liberation Organization in Lebanon. However, it swiftly shifted its allegiance to the Syrian army. During the Camps War, waged by the Amal movement with Syrian support to prevent the resurgence of the Palestine Liberation Organization, Hezbollah emerged as a star in the firmament. Hezbollah, backed by Iran, came into being as an organization composed of devout Shiite members in 1982, with the mission to confront the Israeli invasion and support Palestinian forces. In late 1986, Hezbollah faced accusations of 2 abductions. Consequently, the Syrian government deployed a special force in West Beirut, where it was believed the hostages were held. In February of the following year, 1987, the Syrian army targeted Hezbollah's headquarters in West Beirut, resulting in the execution of 23 party militants. On June 1, 1987, Prime Minister Rashid Karami was assassinated in a military helicopter explosion while en route to Beirut. Foreign diplomats continued to be kidnapped, and in February of the following year, 1988, Hezbollah militants attacked a checkpoint affiliated with the Amal movement, killing one of the officers loyal to the movement. The following month, clashes erupted between Hezbollah and Amal after an explosion in the Bahr al-Abidi suburb targeted Shiite religious leader Sayyid Muhammad Hussein Fadlallah, whom the media had dubbed the spiritual leader of Hezbollah. However, he survived the explosion, which claimed the lives of 80 individuals. Armed conflict between Hezbollah and Amal engulfed West Beirut, prompting Syrian forces to enter to maintain security. The Syrian army deployed across the southern suburbs, but the conflict persisted in the south and various parts of Lebanon, culminating in what became known as the Fraternal War, a struggle that endured until the conclusion of the Lebanese Civil War. In the summer of 1988, President Amin Gemayel, in the final minutes of his tenure, dismissed the government led by Salim Haas as an interim president following the assassination of its original head, Rashid Karami. He announced the formation of a transitional military government, with General Michel Aoun assuming leadership. The opposing factions couldn't agree on the appointment of the new candidate. After the government was formed, Muslim ministers expressed their apologies for participating in it. Salim Haas rejected his dismissal, considering it illegitimate and a breach of the National Covenant, which stipulated that the Prime Minister should be a Sunni Muslim, not a Christian. This led to the existence of 2 concurrent governments, the first, led by Salim Haas in West Beirut, with a Muslim majority, and the second, under the presidency of Michel Aoun in East Beirut, with a Christian majority. Thus, the country slid into a perilous spiral of discord, left without a president, with executive power divided between 2 governments. When the government of Salim Haas decided to remove Michel Aoun from the leadership of the army, units loyal to Aoun clashed with the Lebanese forces militia. On March 14, 1989, Michel Aoun attempted to regain control of the Lebanese coastline. When he declared that it was necessary to confront the Assad regime, Syrian anger erupted. Syrian forces shelled the presidential palace in Babda and the Ministry of Defense headquarters in Yars. This led to Aoun's declaration of what he called the Liberation War against Syrian occupation. Aoun relied on the advantage of the positions he held and the support of local populations and allied militias. Meanwhile, the Syrians later received support from the United States in exchange for Syria's alignment with the coalition forces against Iraq during the Gulf War. Aoun criticized American support for Syria and drew closer to Iraqi President Saddam Hussein, who supplied the Lebanese armed forces with weapons. All attempts by the Arab League to halt the fighting failed, and Beirut, in both its eastern and western parts, burned under the fires of shelling, with innocent civilians, as usual, paying the price in hundreds of casualties. In late September 1989, Lebanese MPs initiated talks in the Saudi city of Taif with the aim of resolving the Lebanese conflict. The following month, they reached the National Reconciliation Document, which was drafted between the warring parties in Lebanon through Syrian-Saudi mediation. Michel Aoun rejected the agreement due to a clause allowing the Syrian army to deploy across all Lebanese territories without specifying a timeline for its withdrawal. He considered anyone who signed and accepted it a traitor. Aoun issued a decree to dissolve the parliament to prevent it from endorsing the agreement. However, the agreement was signed on October 22, 1989, and was ratified by the Lebanese parliament the following month despite Aoun's opposition. The parliament convened at the Clyde Air Base and elected René Mouad as the president of the Lebanese Republic. However, he was assassinated 17 days later in a blast that targeted his convoy. Syria accused Aoun of being behind the incident. The MPs convened again and elected Elias Rawi, who announced Aoun's removal from the leadership of the army, appointing Emile Lahoud in his place. Aoun was urged to vacate the presidential palace in Babda immediately but refused. Lebanese citizens then gathered at the presidential palace and declared their sit-in, naming it the People's Palace. Over time, the relationship between the army and the Lebanese forces became increasingly strained, especially after the Lebanese forces leader, Samir Gigi, agreed to the Taif Agreement. In late December 1989, Michel Aoun prepared for a major battle later referred to as the War of Abrogation. This conflict arose from accusations by Samir Gigi that Michel Aoun was attempting to dismantle his forces. In January 1990, the Lebanese army launched an assault on the Qamar al-Askariya military school in Ain el-Rumana, which belonged to the Lebanese forces. They captured it, leading to clashes between the Lebanese army units under Michel Aoun's command and the Lebanese forces militia. The battle raged on for 6 months, resulting in the weakening of Christian forces. The Syrian army entered East Beirut for the first time. Michel Aoun found no support from anyone except for Iraqi President Saddam Hussein, who had invaded Kuwait on August 8, 1990. This invasion damaged his government, and Michel Aoun lost his last ally. On October 13, 1990, the Syrian army took control of all the territories held by the Lebanese army and besieged Michel Aoun in the presidential palace in Babda. He was asked to move to the French embassy to declare his surrender. He indeed moved and announced his surrender via the radio, urging the Lebanese army to take orders from the new army commander, General Emile Lahoud. With Michel Aoun's surrender and his forces, the Lebanese civil war that had ravaged Lebanon for 15 years officially came to an end. It had resulted in over 150,000 casualties, mostly innocent civilians, along with hundreds of thousands of wounded, orphans, widows, and disabled individuals. Everyone emerged from it as losers, serving as a lesson to never forget the horrors of war.